Hi everybody, Mike King here with Powered to Move, and today we are looking at our hand cycles again, the Force G and the Force R, which is now called an RX. This is an older model Force R, but we're looking at getting ready for your ride, part one. And the first point is setting up your bike. Most people, when they get their bike for the first time, there really isn't any instruction on how to set it up for you individually. And everybody's different. Arm length, trunk height, leg length, where your disability is. I am a T7, so my balance isn't that great, so my seat angle is back a little further. And a seatbelt position. I'm going to demonstrate on the Force G, and I'm actually going to transfer into it to show you how to do that as well. And that is a good way to get started in how to get your bike set up for you. I prefer transferring left to right. You may prefer transferring from the other side, right to left, but this is the way I'm more comfortable. And you want to set your back angle for the first time at about 30 degrees. I have mine at about 40 because that's where I like it. But in transferring into my bike, I like to throw my leg across the other side and lower myself down into it. This is the best way to get it set up or to figure things out for yourself, because it's not easy knowing how far out you want the footrest. And you see the footrest here, they have a stirrup. You can adjust this up and down depending on how long your feet are. You want that front bar to be right about the middle of your foot. And I balance myself with this arm so I'm not falling over when I lift my leg to rest it in there. And the same with this side. I balance myself with my right arm and lift my leg up in that stirrup. And you can see where I have the bar here with where my foot height is, so that I'm pushing against it. You want your leg to sit in there comfortably with your butt against the back of your seat. And you can measure that length at the beginning by sitting in a chair and stretching out your foot and measuring from back here, right behind your buttocks, to the bottom of your foot, to measure from here to there to get this set for the first time. And it does have a bracket right here that works with an Allen key. You can loosen that or tighten it to slide this piece out and in depending on the length of your leg. Once you get your footrests adjusted, which is probably the easiest part of this setup, you want to look at your crank distances from your chest out to here and how to determine that. And that also affects your back angle. But here I am at the furthest extension of my crank, and you'll notice my elbow is not locked out. You do not want to lock your elbow out. It could cause damage to your elbow, as well as it doesn't give you the energy when you're climbing a hill. So you want it to be almost extended the whole way. And as you're climbing a hill, you're pushing back on your back, so it's going to stretch out a little more. But that's the general distance that you want your arm length to be from on your crank. So to make that adjustment so your elbows are not locking out, moving this crank in or further away from you depending on your arm length, take a look at these two screws, two Allen bolts right down here. You need to loosen both of those, which loosens this black collar, and you can slide this whole crank section in or out to adjust it for where you want your arm length to be. And then of course you snug them back up. You also need to balance your pedals here so they're not like this when you're cranking. You want them as straight and as level as you can. The best way to do that is by sitting in your bike to do that. Next is your seat belt. I like the click strap, the M2 seat belt. It snugs you in there very good. Now, one of the things, this lever cranks it tight. The gray lever you pull up to loosen it. The thing I like about this seat belt is it's very snug, it's got good pads, and it's very important with your seat belt because that also can keep your butt in a solid position so that you're not shearing your skin or causing any pressure problems. I think the biggest mistake hand cyclers make is positioning their seat belt, which causes more pressure on their ischiums or tailbone than they need to apply there. And I have mine in front of my hips, actually right over the top part of my thigh. And I can crank that down as snug as I can get my seat belt until it actually doesn't tighten anymore. And my butt is not going to move. Now, I don't usually like to wear it that tight because that can be harmful or cause some red marks on my thighs, but I snug it down pretty good so my butt is not sliding, which prevents me from getting any pressure problems. And to be in this bike 2 hours to 3 hours is not going to hurt my legs at all, but it would hurt my butt if I was putting too much pressure on my ischiums. So that's part of the seat belt, and you can adjust that. If you look down here, it's just held on by a zip tie, and you can put that on the frame, even up further or back further, depending on the size of your trunk. I showed you how to get in the bike before I showed you the leg adjustment and the crank adjustment. I'm going to show you how to get out in doing the back angle adjustment. I told you that I'm a T7 paraplegic, so my balance is not all that great. And I want to be reclined enough that when I am pulling back on my stroke or my crank, it doesn't pull my body forward. And in doing that, I'm pedaling backwards, but when I'm pulling this way, I am leaning back far enough that it's not going to pull my body forward. And I'm using arm strength when I'm climbing the hill or when I'm powering on a straight or cruising on the downhill. And that back angle adjustment is this whole back piece. And I'm going to show you how to get out to show you where that adjustment levels are. Naturally, you got to loosen your seat belt. And you go through lifting your legs out. And it's pretty important, as most people with disability know in transfers, of where your leg positions are. In getting out of the hand cycle, to drag this leg across into my chair prevents me from a smooth transfer, which is why it's good to be limber, because I lift my leg across the crank to cross it over to get out of my hand cycle. And you got to position your chair at the right position, and of course lock the brakes. I always like to flip that wheel front so it's better support. And I use this arm on the back of my seat and this one on my chair, and it's almost like a two move transfer to get back out. It takes a little bit of strength, it takes some practice, but it is possible once you build up that arm strength. As you saw, getting out of the hand cycle requires some arm strength. But there are other ways you can get out of the hand cycle that you might want to start with. One of the ways is with a regular milk crate, and I have a good padded cushion on top of it so I don't hurt my butt. But you can transfer from there to here, and then from here into your wheelchair. Other people also use what they have out there called a bath lift. It's made for getting out of a bathtub, and it's a battery powered lift, so it doesn't take a power cord, and you can bring that, which is right down on the same level as the Handcycle, transfer onto it, lift yourself up to wheelchair height, and transfer back into it. But now let's look at the back angle adjustment, which is a simple front and back adjustment, moving this forward or backwards depending where you want it based on your disability level. It again is adjusted by a screw that is used by an Allen key right here. Actually, the screw head is on this side, but you'll see the other end sticking out there, and it just loosens this clamp, and this pipe slides forward or backwards in that. I put marks on mine, different positions that I've tried as you're adjusting it, so you know where you were before you make the final adjustment and get it set up to where you want it to be for your body style and your disability level. Next point we want to talk about is shifting gears. And which crank sprocket do you ride your bike in? Well, as a beginner, I started out in the middle sprocket. And I think that's probably the best sprocket for most people to start in based on the terrain that you're going to ride. The smaller sprocket is for climbing hills. And usually you will only use that sprocket if you're climbing a hill. And of course the large sprocket here on the crank is where most experienced riders would ride. But to start out, it's best to be in the middle sprocket. And to get there, you actually got to move your shifter lever, which works your derailleur, to the middle of these white markings, or whatever markings you have on your shifter lever. And that will shift your chain down onto the middle ring. If you take it all the way up, it'll take it down on the small ring. And of course, all the way up to the plus mark has it up on the big ring. Normally, you don't have to change your crank sprocket very often, like I said, unless you're climbing a hill. So we want to look at the front cassette, which on my Force G here is a 9-speed. And you see it has 9 rings on the far side. This is my disc brake here, so don't mistake that for that. And of course, here's the derailleur, which shifts your gears front and back. And that has worked with my trigger finger and my thumb up here on my right hand side. And to shift it into on the lower sprocket, which gives me more speed, I'm using my thumb. To make it easier going to the big sprocket on the cassette ring, I'm using my trigger finger. An easy way to figure out how fast you're pedaling and to know what gear to be in is just to use a basic stopwatch or wristwatch and count how many revolutions per minute you make. And a good average to start at is 40 to 50 revolutions per minute. They call that RPMs. And in comparison, me being a more advanced or experienced rider, I'm averaging 95 RPM per minute, where your elite riders, those that are on the Paralympic team, are doing anywhere from 110 to 120. So that gives you something to shoot for as you start out. But to average 40 to 50 revolutions per minute will determine what gear you want to be in. And if you're spinning too fast and you're getting winded, you're in too high of a gear and you want to shift to a smaller sprocket. And to do that, you're using your thumb on the gear system that I have. And that puts you onto a lower sprocket up front here. If you're pedaling and using too much strength and you're finding your muscles are really getting tired and you're not spinning 40 to 50 revolutions per minute, you want to shift to a bigger sprocket, which is shifting up on the chain ring up front. That will give you a more balanced ride and an ability to build up your cardiovascular conditioning, which will allow you to ride longer, ride faster, and enjoy it a lot more. So the last thing we want to cover is braking and making a turn. When do you brake when you're coming into a turn? And what's the body position you want to be in when you're making a turn? As you can see, I transferred over into my Force R, or the RX as they call it today. And it's no different than a Force G when it comes to when to brake and how to make your turn. Your brake is also on your right, my right hand, right beside the gear shifter. Or if you have a left-hand shifter, that's where your brake would possibly be. Or you can have a brake on the opposite side, depending how you prefer to ride. But as I'm coming down the road and I see a turn ahead, my first thing to do is to look at that turn and see how sharp it is, to know how much I need to brake coming into the turn and how much to brake during the turn. Also, body position is very important. If I'm making a right turn and I know what my speed is and I know how sharp that turn is, I want to make sure that I get my body to the inside of the turn. And it's the same in the Force G. You want to lean your body over to the inside of the turn, which allows you to put weight on the inside so your bike isn't going to turn over. The same thing if I'm making a left turn, I lean to the left side. And I'm using my arm strength as I'm pedaling to make that change in position back and forth. And of course, with my seat belt that I have on, my butt doesn't move. And it's just my upper body that's moving, which again, keeps you safely in the position you need to be as you're riding. So I'm going to head out for a ride. Join us the next time for part 2 of Getting Ready for a Ride, where we look at a little more technical setup of our bike to make sure it's operating properly and you enjoy your ride and you have fun and you get the best workout that you can. Have a great day.